Commitment to transparency for good news, and you still must have transparency when there's bad news. So transparency isn't only for the good days, it's for every day. And this administration will stand up to that through the very last day in office, which will be December 1st. And so I hope that will continue in future administrations. Certainly, it's easy to share good news, but we must also be able to have open, honest dialogue when it's maybe not so good. Yes?
I'd like to follow up on the meeting tonight. So could you say more about what has happened tonight with regard to the compliance officer, that the bill that you're submitting?
We've sent forward, actually it's a resolution.
Resolution, all right.
Over a year ago, I sent down a bill to create a compliance officer position. It was September a year ago, and I was informed that I couldn't get 4 votes. There is a belief by many folks that because there's a process in place for airing grievances through the EEOC, that it's not necessary to do that in county government specifically. And while I do understand that position and that process has been very successful, I believe we need to go a step forward. You need a place to go outside of your chain of command if you feel uncomfortable or that there's a problem. And I'll make it personal for a moment and say, you know what, having been a victim of rape, I understand that if you've been raped and you need to address it, for example, in the service, how do you handle that? Do you go to your direct supervisor or superior, or do you go outside the chain of command? For me, that just seems obvious. It's very difficult to go to your direct supervisor and air a grievance when it's so personal in nature. And so for that reason, I believe there needs to be another place to go where you feel it's safe and that there's going to be follow-up and resolution. And it needs to be, it needs to have the support within the organization and the professionalism in the position to be able to address those issues. And that's why I think this is so important.
I have a follow-up question. You mentioned the pay inequities with regard to the African-American department heads. So have those inequities been repaired?
Yes, of course, of course. Forgive me, I thought that was a foregone conclusion.
Oh, there are no foregone conclusions anymore.
Well, in this administration, I would hope that that would be understood. We address those issues immediately. Now, you can have a discussion about qualifications for a position and whether or not someone was the most suited for that position or not. Those were decisions made long before I arrived. There has been discussion about that. The bottom line is when you're asking someone to do the same job, you should be paying them the same amount of money. And I thought it was surprising and fairly glaring that the only black department head in county government was paid substantially less than his peers. And so we addressed that issue immediately. Again, this administration, I have an incredible team of folks here. And forgive me, I'll just call her out for a minute. Karen Cook is our Chief Administrative Officer, and she is bilingual. She is thorough. It was intentional to hire a lawyer for that position, and when she handles something, it is done thoroughly and professionally. And in that particular instance, again, it was addressed immediately, thoroughly, and professionally.
Ms. Newman, I wanted to follow up. First, like Gerald, I commend you for publicly coming out and being transparent. The future is something you have indicated you want to give some advice to. Whoever may win the county executive race, you would hope they would follow through with the compliance officer going forward. What steps are you taking to meet with the county executive candidates, and will you be making a formal endorsement based on whatever you learned as a result of whether they're going to follow your vision?
I think the voters should decide ultimately who they think is best to lead our county. My focus really is on doing the work of the community through my last day in office. As you can see, our workload hasn't slowed down. We're continuing to do the work every day that needs to be done in running this county the best we can. And so we'll continue to focus on that through the line. Although I am going to get married again to my husband on November 15th. So other than that.
So you're not meeting with, the reason I'm raising this with you is, it seemed to me it's an important issue. It's one that all voters should know where candidates stand, county executive candidates. In your position as county executive currently, meeting with those candidates, getting some sense of whether it's their commitment, you could help inform voters as to, from your perspective, having talked with them, your best advice, your best informed advice as to whether or not one or the other candidate would be more persuasive in following them.
Well, Mr. Stoughton, I would respectfully suggest as the head of the caucus for African Americans in our community, you would be ideally suited to vet the candidates on these particular issues, as would the NAACP. So, there are many ways to get to know the candidates and understand where they are on their positions, but also understand their history and their intentions with regard to hiring in the future. That information should be readily available, and I do believe that there are many opportunities within the community to, vet the candidates around this particular subject. I would encourage you to do so. My role here is to put forward a resolution really asking them to consider this, not only the next county executive, but the next council, because there will be many changes on the council as well.
Can I surmise from your answer that you're not going to be doing a formal endorsement of a candidate for county executive?
I have no intention to formally endorse a candidate. I think the voters should make that decision ultimately. I respect the process in the primary, and I will respect it in the general.
Ms. Newman, I'm sorry. Can you give us the approximate date of the initial event and approximately how many people are in that department that was seeing
It
the news?
initially occurred in August. It came to my attention in September.
Do you have
All of our
a date
departments
of the
are
initial
very
event?
large departments.
Right. Do you have the initial date of the event in August?
I don't have it in front of me. Does anyone recall the initial date?
It was
August 8th.
August 8th. Is that for sure approximately? August 2nd. Okay.
Well, there was an initial event and then a subsequent event because it was not dismantled.
Right.
Yes,
And there was the investigation within the department initially.
That was done immediately.
yes, Mrs. Newman, thank you for the press conference today. But may I ask, I think you indicated that the persons involved, that there was some disciplinary action taken.
There was, yes.
Are you at liberty to say what that action was?
I won't give
The
specifics
evaluation?
because it's a personnel issue,
Okay.
and I really am very committed to maintaining confidentiality on personnel issues. Disciplinary action was taken. It was taken immediately. Where I had cause for concern is that that process occurred outside of the Office of Personnel or the department head. And I think it's very important that there be a protocol in place and that it be followed, which is why I think it's absolutely essential to have a compliance officer, and I think that person should be an attorney in county government.
Excuse me, ma'am, is there a timeline or one of your staff to advise timelines for investigations to be started and to be completed?
Well, typically there is immediate follow-up. I can't comment on historically how that's been handled. I can tell you in our administration there's always been immediate follow-up. The day I received the email is the day that we began our investigation into the issue. The day that it became, that a supervisor became aware of the initial incident, the investigation began. So there was immediate follow-up in both cases.
But there is no timeline established that investigation take 90 days?
Oh, I would defer to the Office of Personnel on that.
Generally 60 days.
Generally, or can it extend longer than 60?
I suspect there's a reason for the extension, it could be, but generally 60 days. Generally, we try to complete in 60 days.
And that's all county government department heads?
Well, for investigations,
Yes.
for operations, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Did you say there were 2 employees that made the news? One was white, one was black, and then there was a supervisor that was disciplined for not immediately?
Not exactly. A white employee assembled the news, a black employee observed. Then a white employee became aware of it and was notified. Actually, a white employee found the news, and then they left it in place for a couple of weeks after that.
Another white employee?
Correct. And then the initial black employee who observed the assembly of the news saw that it was still in the department and took it to a black supervisor.
So the black employee, he did not help, he observed.
He observed.
Okay, 'cause
He did
initially-
he did not help assemble the news.
Okay.
He observed the assembly of
Okay.
the news.
So it was made by one white employee?
Correct. They both participated in making jokes about it, and that presents an interesting conversation because you must wonder whether the participation in it was because he was uncomfortable or because he really thought it was amusing. And so I think that really invites us to have a conversation about the appropriateness and the need for cultural sensitivity in county government,